of it. It must have transformed the way that you do your work.
It did. We tried to actually start to regulate the pattern races in the late 90s. But we were unable to do it because, first of all, France, I don't think at that time had a handicap, and they were like the cog in the middle of the wheel. Most of the horses either came from there or bypassed them. So we couldn't really establish a level. Therefore, everybody just called Group 1 what they thought were their best, Group 2 what. But there's no value to that if there's no criteria. So actually, these rules and regulations had to be made before we could do anything. And then we could make this committee, which Jean-Pierre did. And fortunately, we've got on very well. And we've had some very interesting times to establish where we've got now. And now we've actually got 2 years of, we've finished 2 years of figures. We've agreed on 2 years. The system doesn't calculate the race. The system keeps what we put in it so that we can all go in and see what the other one is thinking, what the other one is doing with their race. Do we agree with that? Do we think it should be a pound higher or a pound lower? And all those things we put in the system during the year, and at the end of the year, we have to agree on each race before we can publish a figure for each horse. And at the end of these 3 years, at the end of this year actually, we'll be able to assess what each race is worth, if it's worth a Group 1 status, if it's only worth a listed status. Because before the 3 years are up, you can't do that. And at the end of this year, we'll be able to see, which we can already see actually, but then we will be able to prove to everybody this race isn't good enough, this race needs to be upgraded. So there will be a lot more to sort out. And even with the regulations, some people don't like that there are such strict regulations, but they're not unreasonable demands. They're an integral part of the regulations. If we don't have them, there's no value to any of it.
And we'll talk a little bit more later about those regulations and about those how those handicap figures are arrived at. Because I was talking to Jean-Pierre recently about the subjectivity that is employed in that, and but the fact that everybody has access to everybody else's data now must be quite difficult. But I'd just like to bring in Dr. Gadot, because we can see now that we've established a pattern. Everybody is running to the same standards. The information is freely available to all those professionals involved in the industry. But Dr. Gadot, even with all that, it has to be administered properly on the course, and the horses have to be running as they are when they say they are. And I know that doping is one of the issues that you have been very outspoken on and is an area of specialism. In order for all this to work, then things like doping need international control.
Yes, of course. You see all the work done by the handicappers and the pattern committee, and everything will be destroyed and totally destroyed if the performances of the horse in racing are false. It is a competition of horses. It's not a competition of chemists or vets. So it is a main concern for all the world, but especially for the International Federation of Horse Racing Authority. And we put in the international agreement a long time ago an article about the doping control, the medication control. And in this article, we said that integrity of racing is paramount. And then we need to have a fair competition, but only to have a fair competition, but also for the safety of horses and the safety of jockey, because we can have accidents. And it is important now to think to the welfare of horses, But on the top of that, if there is no betting, we will have no race. And betting image is very important. And people want to trust in horse racing. And for trusting in horse racing, you must have a fair competition. But when you have said that, you have one key point. We, through racing, we organize the breeding area and the selection. And you can see what is the situation of the America about selection. And we are very happy to be in a zone which is free of medication in racing, because now the United States of America is facing some difficulty and try to move in this direction. And I would like to thank Emirates, because I've been told that a few days ago or a few weeks ago, racing in Emirates will be done without anabolic steroid in training, and that is a good step forward. It is very important. You can see the damage from the new market problem a few weeks or months ago, and it is very important to say to the media, to the public, to the punters, we respect horses. Our racing world is free of medication. So we work for that. We organize in the different parts of the world a system to guarantee that the performances of horses are fair. And we address in the second time not the problem of the control in racing, which has been done a few years ago, but the problem of the control in training. Medication in training must be transparent. And that is a key point for racing and for the evolution of the breeding area. So we work, we have a research team also. We organize, by example, in Europe, a joint system with 9 countries to be sure that we put in the same place all our effort for research. And when we have finished that, we hope that we can guarantee to public and media to have a very fair competition.
Thank you, Dr. Geller, and that will take us forward. And we must stress that those situations where it doesn't go right, the high-profile situations that Dr. Geller referred to just then, are thankfully relatively few. When it does go wrong, we turn to you guys, the lawyers, because in terms of enforcing laws, but there is a bigger role for you to play, isn't there, in helping us to form those laws in the first place and to make sure that there is not ambiguity as we go along the way?
Definitely, you're right, Philip. And following my fellow colleagues in the panel in their speech, and you can see the evolution of horse racing and the patterns and handicappers, how it went from where it started and where it is today. I totally agree with you with what you said, that when things go wrong, you come to the legal people. However, as I believe that prevention is better than curing. So to prevent, you have to go to the legal people initially, at the initial stage, and the legal system and the regulations should go hand in hand with establishing the regulations. And it's very important that people from the field with the experience be there at these committees, as I've heard, like Pam and Izetta and Mr. Jean-Pierre Degas. They all were involved at the initial stages of the drafting of the regulations. That's very important from the people of the experience, but the legal ground, or the legal, if you like, legal mind is important as well, because you know, the way you draft the regulations is the art of drafting, and this is where it all can go wrong, because when you have gray areas, you're open to interpretation. When it's black or white, it's black and white. What I like about horse racing and Arabian horse racing regulations is how clear things are, especially if we talk about doping. You mentioned doping a couple of times in your discussions without tapping onto doping. I'm very fascinated actually by how strict is the doping rules applicable to the horsing industries. If you review the different awards, arbitral awards, or the decisions issued by the tribunals within the FEI or within the CAS, you see that there's no mercy when it comes to doping. Why? Because you just mentioned now integrity of the sports. When we talk about integrity of the sports, it's very important to be transparent. It's very important to be clear in our sanctions and to apply a zero tolerance approach. And this is where you have your sports at a high level. And equestrian and equine sports have always been known to be the noblest sports that existed. Why? Because it always kept its integrity. You also mentioned in your introduction just now that although these issues or these wrongdoings are few, but the impact is huge. We've heard what happened a couple of weeks back, and we've seen the reaction, which I salute. I can only humbly salute such a reaction, because that's a really noble reaction to what happened. Doping should not go into the sports, because doping will definitely hit the integrity of sports. If the integrity of sports is hit, all the following infrastructure also will crumble, such as betting will be then not right. We know that things will be played. We've heard about scandals in betting in football, for example, an industry which is close to my heart. We've seen how the betting agents were able to affect match results, and this is not something we would like to see in the horse industry, definitely.
Absolutely. And enforcement of laws and rules is one way to make sure that we keep proper control. Another way is through education. And Yasser, I know that you're very involved in the Emirates Racing Authority with the younger riders. It's important that they learn proper practices and have a strong awareness of the rules as they're coming up.
It's really very challenging and very tough, to try to bring up young boys and girls, into the sport. Especially, in horse racing, the demand of the job is not like just any other sport, and especially in the UAE. And since we introduced, this program in 2002, with the little population of the United Arab Emirates, we don't have that big number of boys to bring into the program. And the first one we had was Ahmed, who was here early in the day. You bring them in, different mentality, different way of life. They didn't grow up as in racing industry as you could find in Ireland, for example, or in England. You could find, say, like Ryan Moore. He grew up in a racing family. But Ahmed came from a camel family. And he never sat on a horse, before he joined the program. So it was very challenging. So you have to go with them, through a lot of grooming, educating, training. We don't have a school in the UAE, so we don't license, apprentice jockeys, straight away, for the UAE. So we bring them, we place them with a trainer for a season or so, just to do the first year horsemanship. And then we have a good relation with the school in Ireland. That is the first place that they go to and have their initial training there. They come back and we place them again with his master, and then it depends how he progresses. And we go through so many educational programs, Ahmed, when he joined, now the media loves him, he talks and he's naughty and he's all this kind of flamboyant type of boy. But when he came, he was like very shy boy. He barely speaks. So that's what type of things, you try to educate them with media, with rule of racing, with accounting, with so many different things. And with that small number you have, it's not necessary that he could make it as a jockey, but you look after that. If, God forgive, that he had a fall or he can't continue, in his being a jockey in a young age, what else he could do. So we have that in mind as well. I mean, to try to train them to pursue any other field in the sport. I mean, like be maybe a trainer in the future or something like that. So our problem really is that we don't have that big number of boys that we could bring in and try to educate and try to make other jockeys.
And those of us who were here this morning and saw the Jockey Revelation session would agree that Ahmed is an absolute credit to you. He spoke very eloquently this morning and very enthusiastically. Just one question that I wanted to ask you, because you said that you don't have such a large pool to draw from. Last year in November, as part of the Sheikh Mansour Festival, we saw that race that was run under the promoted by the European Association of Racing Schools, and that brought young apprentices from all over the world to compete in Abu Dhabi. It must be good for your young people to be joined by young people who have been trained in other countries by other authorities.
Definitely, definitely. I mean, now, I mean, like we see, I mean, the international horses, I mean, racing all over the world. You have horses going from Dubai to race in America. You have horses coming from Australia to race in Ascot. So it was a really good chance, I mean, for these young guys, I mean, young boys, I mean, to go around the world as well, compete among each other. And it's not only competing, get to know each other, get to know different cultures, get to make friendship with a boy from South Africa, I mean, getting to know, I mean, a boy from New Zealand. That type of things, I mean, we really support and we really encourage, and thanks, I mean, to this type of initiatives and Sheikh Mansour and Sheikh Fatma series, I mean, they are really putting these things, I mean, to the favor of these young people.
It's very important, very important. We are in France, of course, and so that makes Axel our host today. We're talking very much about Arabian racing on the international stage and how it's grown enormously in other territories. But in France, Arabian racing has always been very strong.
Yes, of course, we can say that. Allocation in France represents a little bit more than 3 million euros now, and we can be really thankful for all our sponsors as well for this increase. This amount has increased a lot for the past 5 years, and we can say a special mention from France Galop, who has helped us for this increase, but also for our sponsors. And we are really thankful to, obviously, Sheikh Mansour Festival and to Lara Sawaya, who is doing a lot for us. So we can say that now in France, we are organizing 48 races for 4 years and older, and 36 races for 3 years old. So that's a real program for Arabian racing. And now on Sunday we have the chance to have this new opportunity for 3 years old. We have the Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan Prix Urur, which is a listed PA. So it's a new race in France. So this is a great opportunity for our owners and breeders, French and from all over the world.
Which will keep owners and breeders running their horses in France and will keep the industry prospering here as it has done for many, many years. I just wanted to turn to Ahmed to talk a little bit about keeping up to date with the regulations. We've heard from the panel, from Jean-Pierre particularly, and it's been over a number of years that the pattern has been created. And it's not that many years. It has been quite a rapid progression. From a racing authority point of view, you are chairman of the Egyptian Breeders' Authority. From a racing authority point of view, is it hard to keep up?
First, we have to face some facts in the situation that we have, because through the last few years, things have been going in progress. And more challenges come to the surface, need from every association a solution for what they are facing in the problems. I think the last 5-6 years was very good because there was a lot of attention about increasing the races for the Arabian horses worldwide. It have been supported from everywhere in the world, especially from the Middle East, especially from United Arab Emirates. And creating these races have make a lot of support for the whole industry, and at the same time makes a lot of things change on the top of the service need to be taken care of and see more solutions. And at the same time, it creates more problems in way or another. And one of the most interesting things which has happened last few months ago, there is a problems going on from a year or something concerning some sort of purity or whatever you can mention it. And there is an area which is meant to be taking care of that, which is the AHO. AHO have been created from all the countries of the world, or most all of them, to take care of the purity and the paperwork which is concerning these horses worldwide. There was some sort of rumors around, whatever, and then from what I'm seeing now, there is some sort of intervene between the authority of the registry and the authority of the race. And this has happened only 2-3 months ago. At that point, I think, when we try to solve a problem and create a bigger problem, because we agreed in this conference 3 years ago that we have to accept our differences, we have to accept our ideas from the other side, and at the same time to keep this industry going on the right track. We have to bear in mind there is different opinion, there is different schools, different ideas about purity, about Arabian horse, how he looks like, or are we going for identity, or we are going for racing, what is the purpose of the race, are we make the race for racing only, or just it's a reason to keep the Arabian horse industry all going and picking the good out of the best. What happens that I'm seeing that we need to clarify a very certain clear line between the registry and their homework, which is they should do and solve it, and the race, which should be taking care of the association, which is meant to take care of the race. And at the same time, like in ICAHO, ICAHO is meant to take care of the beauty of the Arabian horse competitions in Europe and in the Middle East. Like in the AHO, AHO now is the Arab Horse Organization, which is meant to be taking care of the breeders all around the world and helping creating a proper way of breeding the Arabian horse worldwide. We cannot mix the paper. We have to be very clear, and we have to be very honest with ourselves. To make the things going on the right track, we have to keep the distance between every organization and the other. So every organization has to do the job which is created for, and not the other organization was made to. So I think I need an opinion, even from the panel here. Are we supposed to go on the right track at this minute, or we need to clarify that we need to put lines between every organization and the duty and the things they should be done?
And maybe we'll get some opinion on that later, but two very important points I'd like to pick up from that is, and one was raised yesterday in the breeding panel, when somebody made the point that we'd made a discussion in Berlin last year, and we're talking about a similar subject again here this year, and the importance of evaluating the benefit of this conference to make sure that we keep progressing all the time, and that we raise these issues, we highlight these issues, and we continue to move forward. That was one point. Another point that came up conversationally with Izetta earlier on was, she said, in the UK, you have a phrase which I'll remind you of, which was that we'll agree to differ.
We agree to disagree.
We agree to disagree. And so you're telling me the English phrases, but we'll agree to disagree. And maybe there are issues within the sport where we have to continue to agree to disagree. Dr. Ghetto, on doping, you're categoric. There is, and on medication, there is absolutely no area for agreeing to disagree. But are there other areas in which we can?
Well, a few minutes ago, somebody spoke about zero tolerance. And the concept is very interesting because we worked during years and years with zero tolerance. And we arrived 15 years ago in the situation to be able, thanks to the technical capabilities, we were able to catch product a few days or weeks after the use. And if it is normal and acceptable for the doping drugs, it would not be the same for the therapeutical drugs. So we slowly move in the system to build a new part. We keep the zero tolerance for the doping drugs, and then we worked on the elimination of the therapeutical drugs. I take an example. If you eat an aspirin 3 weeks ago, there is no effect today. You are okay for that. But we are able now to catch 1 gram of aspirin given 3 weeks before. So we were obliged to take that in account and to move in the system. And then for therapeutical drugs, we have a lot of experimental challenge to be able to now have screening limits for only therapeutical drugs. And then we can guarantee, with a screening limit for bute, by example, that at the time we find it at a very, very small level, 10 picograms, by example, there is no effect on the performances. So with the time, we built a system with a zero tolerance and a therapeutical deal, and we accept now a very, very small amount of certain therapeutical drugs, according to the fact that we can guarantee there is no effect at the time of the performances. And we did that with a very important gap to be sure that there is no exception to that. So we work not only on a philosophical system very strong, but we succeed to move a little bit to be in accordance with technical progress, which must be taken in account in the system. Otherwise, it would be unfair for the horse, of course, but also for the owner and the trainer to be disqualified for a drug which has no effect at the time of the competition. So it was very important to move and to accept now to move from a very strong and orthodox system to a more flexible system. But flexibility is not perhaps a good word, because it is inflexible, it is very strong always for the doping problems, but it is fair for the other category of drugs, because we want that horses can be treated during training. It is normal that a horse, a 2 or 3 year old, have problem, and he must be treated. And after the treatment, he can go in racing without this sort of problem. Otherwise, it would be a problem.
Now, Jarir, that was fascinating. Dr. Gadot is very clear on having sort of almost 2 different rules, and that's something that maybe some time ago would have been considered to be one of those grey areas. The horse contains traces and therefore can't run. That's not necessarily what we're saying. And that, I imagine, is the sort of development that you would see your profession being involved in the development.
Definitely, exactly. Actually, what Dr. Gadot just mentioned in the having a flexible, or he refused to call it a flexible, but in a legal term I call it a flexible system, which contains 2 different regimes of sanctions, a regime which is quite strict and quite zero tolerance, and another one which will take into consideration the specificity of sports, because it's totally right. It's unfair to punish someone who is on therapeutical drugs, which will have no effect on performance. So, and this is where the role of the legal profession would come, is in clarifying clarifying those areas. And by a quick reading of the latest regulations published in terms of doping and medication, it's quite clear. And those gray areas are not really gray, as they say. It has clear and detailed specification. And what is good about doping is that it's scientific, and it can be proven in terms of milligrams, and in terms of when the substance has been administered, how it has been administered, what type of, is it by injection, is it oral administration or whatever. So it's very clear, it's scientific, and it helps our it helps our profession a lot, especially if we're on the other side, not on the drafting side, if we're on the defending side, or let's say on the prosecution side. Either way, when we have all these scientific proofs to go to the court or to go to the judicial body, it makes our life easier. First, the clarity of the regulations. Second, the scientific proofs of the offense, or if you like as we call it in our criminal system, the evidence. It makes our life much, much easier. And this is where you can basically compare between a sports that has evolved in its regulations and a sports that has not evolved in its regulations. And I would like to bring a comparison with the football industry. Although we know that football is like worldwide and it has billions and billions of dollars of investments, but believe me, football industry is not as regulated as the horse industry. So from that angle, I would say that the horses regulations, although quite young in some systems, like we said, the patterning, it's since 2005, and the initiatives have recently been launched. This is the 4th edition of the Sheikh Mansour Festival, but I can easily say that it has gone a long way in terms of being regulated, in terms of being clearly regulated.
That's fascinating, really reassuring to know that comparing horse racing to a major world sport like football, in the eyes of the legal people, our rules and regulations, we really do stand up very well in terms of international comparison. Jean-Pierre, where we are at the moment with the pattern that you brought us up to speed on, that hasn't happened by accident. That was part of a strategy over a number of years. And in the spirit of continuing forward with the sport, what else is there left as part of that strategy that is still, the box is still unticked, so to speak? Where do we go next?
First of all, I would like to come back a little bit about the rules. And to say that the Pattern Race Committee, we are concerned about the rules, and we have established rules, but we are concerned about the rules for the pattern race system only. And this is our main consideration. And the first rule that have been created, they have been drawn by myself in 2010. But at the time, I did not invent, in fact, anything. I took the rule over the European